Scott with SJWellfire.com. Final Days Report, episode 188. Watchman's Warning. That's the name of this VCast. Want to go over some old dreams that I had. And I looked for some of the technology in different white papers. I really couldn't find much. And I'm going to play a video from Z Media, just a small portion of it, where she is interviewing a gentleman on smart cities. I think he calls them concentration camp cities. And he covers these polls that I saw in my dream in a small town. It wasn't exactly the same, but same capabilities. And then he actually talked about how these polls are going to be used for driverless cars. And I had a driverless bubble car that I got into. And right around that time, some sort of system was coming in. I'll play the dream. And I was like, get out, run for the hills. America's destruction is coming. So let's play Z Media in this poll, and then I'm going to play a couple dreams that I had as well, because I think we're closer than I even expected. I mean, if you think about it, when they shut down everything and put up 5G just like that, how fast can they put this enslavement system in? I was thinking it would take them a while, but I don't think so. Let's roll it from Z Media.
Right. So here's an example of a smart pole. They'll have noise sensors and it's for noise pollution, but actually it's really for listening people's conversations.
Of course.
They'll have people counters. They have surveillance cameras. They will have public address systems, like in Auschwitz concentration camps, where the soldiers are giving orders to the to all the people who are the prisoners. They're gonna some of these lamps, I've seen specifications on top of the lights. They are drone charging stations. So in the future, drones will be used both individually as well as in swarms as the aerial police. And I've done there's a lot of information available on DARPA and other websites on these drone swarms and how they're going to be used against enemies of the state.
Yep. And I'm not surprised, Aman, because what they've done, number one, they've killed off a huge portion of the police force, either by forcing anyone with a conscience to resign or, those now dying due to injection injuries. And God only knows what sort of control they're going to have over people with whatever's in these injections. And on top of that, they don't even need a huge police force anymore because we're going to be controlled and policed by AI.
Right. That's right. And also, I mean, if you notice in America, there's been a lot of talk about defunding the police in in the last 2.5, 3 years with, it's all these false flags that they keep coming up with, and then they change the narrative on certain agendas.
Yes.
But one should know that I think the takeaway is these smart poles and smart lights are an integral part of this smart city grid that they are building everywhere. They communicate with each other. They are wirelessly connected, as well as, some of them are connected through cables underground. Some of them may also assist in autonomous driving vehicles in the future. And they're putting smart cables under the roads and all. And so there's a lot of technology going inside the ground and on top through these lights. Right. In order to achieve a lot of the surveillance grid integrated with 5G.
I can't even begin to imagine how harmful all of the signals that these.
One interesting point this gentleman made that I never thought about or covered with the central bank digital currency is I always thought they could program the rules and regulations more like, hey, your social credit score, your carbon footprint is off whack, or maybe you're a Christian and Christian businesses are not allowed, whatever their factors are that they want to program in. And he nailed it. He actually said they can also program their central bank digital currency because it's a programmable voucher via location with geolocating. So let's say they don't want you to actually go 100 yards from your home. They can program your currency for that said capability. It's pretty interesting. They're going to keep you locked in with their currency. That blew me away. So I'll put the link to his video below. Now I want to play my poll dream. For those of you that follow the ministry, you probably heard this before, obviously, but what took me back with the stream is it was in a small town. And again, I wanted to move to a small town to get away from these concentration camps. Let's roll it. But as for my dream, the reason why I'm covering this, I just prayed, Lord, what do you want me to talk about? And I got to tell you, I saw this fugitive, this hipster fugitive. I guess he was in trouble in a small town of like 12,000 people walking around. And this pole was probably cut off here. And it had a little TV screen all around it. And it had facial recognition and said, you need to go back home. You are under house arrest. You know, it was speaking and had kind of that voice line scribble, you know, as something speak. And he was ignoring it at first. And obviously there was a camera on the screen and there was a spotlight as well. And these things were everywhere within the small town. As he heard that, he was going to ignore it. And then he got a call from this woman. I've seen this woman in multiple dreams. She looks like Marie Osmond, attractive middle-aged woman, harlot whore. I think she's the system of the beast of Revelation. I had the dream where she was drowning a bull. Then all of a sudden, all these men of God started dying mysteriously, and 3 others had big ministries thought that there was a hit on their life with bioterrorism. This same woman fired this lady that was going around stealing gas. I had this dream when gas prices were low. And then also I saw this woman directing Nazi soldiers harassing Christian businesses, monitoring them, taxing them, hurting their business. They were underground, slithering around. And there was one more dream as well with this harlot. So I saw her again. So she calls up this guy being monitored by this pole spy system. She calls him up and says, you need to go back home. And then she ends up going to the person's house and they start like dating. It was a weird dream, but to me, it was like the system until they roll out the robots. It's an emperor with no clothes. It's the sense I had. It's like this whore system, this harlot system that has a big shout but no bite. Now, when they start rolling out the dogs with guns and these robots, I'm sure it'll have a bite, and maybe these controlled zombie police officers, but at least in this small town, I got the sense this guy, his instinct was correct to just ignore it, move on. It just reminded me of Ephesians 5:6 with the King James Version. Let no man or woman deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. We cannot be fooled, my friends. We cannot be fooled. But what took me back with this whole thing is the fact that I was in a small town, because I'm looking to get to a small town. Maybe I just need to go live out in the country. So you have to remember you're going to be the computer with this system, right? You're going to be the cell phone by 2030. You're going to have these different wearables, these different tattoos, this nanotech in you. That's part of this whole concentration camp. And they somewhat missed that, I think, in the Z media. I think the host covers it a little bit, but the expert didn't really 100% go there too much. And that's going to be a big part of it. I just read a Microsoft patent from 2004 where they're going to harness your energy to actually power wearables. And then I just saw something from the World Economic Forum. Maybe I'll play this tomorrow, where they have bandages that actually have nanotech RFD tech in it that's powered by your body to detect how the wound is actually healing. They're going to get you used to this tech, this wearable tech. Beast technology, my friends. Let's get in the bubble car dream. Because again, this pole capability I saw within this bubble car as well. And that is when America, all hell was going to break loose here in America. And so this one was very, very clear. Bubble. I wonder if I'm spelling bubble wrong, but there was I had a dream. I don't know if I was I was in a major city, and I just met with Trump. Trump was still alive. He was very, very old and weak, and so obviously he wasn't present to me because he was managing his hotel business. And there were these bubble driverless cars. There was not a steering wheel in there. You just got in, and it wasn't a lamppost. It was more like it was something like that, but it was flat, and I could tell that was driving these bubble cars in the city. And as I was in after the meeting with Trump, I was just sitting there. I think that was more of a timeline gauge. He's still alive, and who knows if he's got like some of these elite life extension technologies like Kissinger doesn't seem to ever leave. Is he in his 90s? So I mean, it could be a long time. But I was in this bubble car and I looked out and there was this huge planet. It looked like the sun, but it was dark, and the sky looked like it was kind of a sunset, but it was late at night. And in my spirit, it said, grab seeds, run for the hills. And that was right before all the earth changes and things were just going to go crazy. And so this could be a timeline portion of this. When you see these bubble cars and you see this planet coming in, make sure you have seeds, try to survive it, and rebuild society after the great collapse and judgment. What I just thought was interesting is listening to that interview with the smart city in that poll, and it just took me where there's on the poll that gentleman showed had some sort of thing that I saw, except mine was in a different angle. I got the sense my poll driving those bubble cars had nothing to do with solar panels, and his might have been a solar panel, but when he said that these poles are going to drive these driverless cars, it was just another validation. And I'm going to try to find the video. There is a video that went viral of a bubble car, somewhat of a bubble car, not as distinct bubble as the car that I got in. The car that I got in my dream had seats facing each other. I mean, it was a total bubble car. But the viral video that happened in China, this bubble-ish car shows up and somebody had to use their cell phone and ID and facial recognition, total enslavement system to actually get into the car. It was pretty creepy. And the car just drove up right next to this sidewalk. Person got in and took off. It's creepy beyond belief. So the poll, I tried to find those polls after I had that dream in small towns, because it was a small town situation. Because I was thinking about moving to a small town where I grew up of 12,000 people. Like, hey, the smart cities won't impact the small little towns that are podunk in the middle of nowhere. And that's what shocked me for the dream. And then just listening to this guy, this smart city expert, show a poll somewhat like my dream, but then also somewhat like the bubble car dream. And when this system comes in place, sudden destruction is going to happen. Those are really the one marker of a timing perspective that I did see. And Trump was still alive. He was feeble, though, in my dream. He was very aged, and it was almost like he was dozing off in the dream. I don't think I mentioned that. He was so tired, like he seemed to be aloof. This reminds me of that article we covered, I think it was the last podcast, about how San Francisco voted to arm robots. So you've got your polls, you're going to have your armed robots. Pray what you could do to stop this. Pray against this evil, my friends. Let's get into just some end of days news. This headline reminded me of a story. 200 Pakistani Christians left homeless after authorities bulldozed their homes without warning. One, I feel for the Christians. Let's pray that they actually get shelter in Pakistan, our brothers and sisters around the world. But this reminded me of a pastor that was talking about how, hey, you think you're going to be off grid with your chickens and even, not tie necessarily into the electrical grid system and just live totally off the land? Because I'm going to tell you, I've had those thoughts. He said the government, when the mark of the beast is implemented, if you don't take it, will come with tanks. So your AR-15 is not going to stop a tank. I just thought that was interesting. And that pastor's story reminded me of this headline, right? So we need to be obedient in the Lord and have the Lord protect us. He can shut down that tank just like that, or change the hearts of man. He could shut down the artificial intelligence power system. Let's continue. Religious organization claims that banks and businesses are beginning to cancel Christians. The persecution is becoming more and more evident. Every day I look for articles on Christian persecution. I probably could do a podcast every day about the Christian persecution around the world, my friends. So get your house in order. Get your Ephesians 6 on, my friends. This is, if you think about this psyop, the takedown of the grid, they're blaming Christians. At least they did at the start. Anti-LGBTQ group suspected in North Carolina power outage. The articles think somebody shot up some of these power facilities, and they're blaming, really, these are Christians. But you got to think about the psyop of wiping out the grid. Cheap energy gets people out of poverty, so they need in and out. They need to enslave us. They want you in the metaverse, my friends. They're preparing you for a dystopian future where you'll own nothing and like it. To me, this is a destruction of the grid by design. It could be a World War III beta test, right? Unless that's theater. I'm 70-30 on that. We're poking the bear 70%, 30%. This is theater. But what was really amazing, whenever there's a negative, there's a positive. There's always a solution to a problem. That's what I always preach. That's an economic theory that I was taught early days when I went to school. So they shut down the grid. And I guess one of these towns is a very cute small town that really does a lot of business for Christmas and holiday shopping. And a lot of businesses just shut their doors because the grid was down. But then a lot started to open up, and they started to take cash. Take cash. Don't take their beast technology system. They're going to wipe out cash when they launch their next pandemic, right? But then let's create cash in local areas. And again, I was just thinking about the poll and this AI beast system, this transhumanism system. You'll be connected to this beast system. You follow me. We obviously talk about it all the time. It just reminded me of Louder with Crowder and Alexa, right? And Google did the same thing with their spy system. These systems knew everybody, but they didn't know Jesus Christ.
Okay, Alexa, who is the Lord Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ is a fictional character.
Never, ever forget. AI hates Jesus Christ. I want to finish with this, with my yay assessment, right? To make Christians look bad, the war on Christians, really in a war on free speech, but it goes deeper. They want to actually call Christians and constitutionalists and people that don't like perversion and people that don't want our kids defiled, people that don't want abortion, as domestic terrorists. People that are into freedom, people are into capitalism, pro-business, pro-family, on and on and on. They want them labeled domestic terrorists, period. And that's why I think what Kanye's doing is a psyop, because they're going to say it's hate speech, it's hurtful, and hate speech could actually turn into violence. You see the playbook, you see the psyop. It's a bunch of BS. They're going after free speech, and this young lady nails it. I'm going to play a bit of her newscast.
On your radar.
Well, this past Monday, the Department of Homeland Security released a bulletin titled Summary of Terrorism Threat to the U.S. Homeland. And what's in it is pretty shocking. It actually labels what is typically considered free speech as terrorism. So I want to go over this bulletin with you. So the bulletin starts off with, the United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including an online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of dis, and malinformation, MDM, introduced and or amplified by foreign and domestic threat actors. Okay, so first of all, remember, this is a bulletin about domestic terrorist threats to the homeland. And they're saying that we're in a heightened threat environment because of what they label MDM, dis, and malinformation, which they're saying could be spread by American citizens. So that's you and me. And if we spread what they label MDM, we could be in hot terrorism water. And when you click on it, you get their definition of what each one is. Says misinformation is false but not created or shared with the intent of causing harm. Malinformation is based on fact but used out of context to mislead, harm, or manipulate. Disinformation is deliberately created to mislead, harm, or manipulate a person, social group, organization, or country. Now, the problem with MDM being labeled as potential terrorist threats is that the definitions of dis, and malinformation keep changing. We've seen this throughout the pandemic, that many people who've been labeled as spreading misinformation or conspiracy theories have been, in fact, right all along. It was a conspiracy theory that there would be vaccine mandates. It was misinformation to say that the vaccine doesn't prevent spread. The Department of Homeland Security say people who spread MDM are possibly threat actors seeking to exacerbate societal friction to sow discord and undermine public trust in government institutions to encourage unrest, which could potentially inspire acts of violence. So they're saying if you sow discord and undermine public trust in a government institution like the CDC, FDA, the Pentagon, or Congress, that could lead to violence, which could happen to, let's say, during a protest. To prevent this, you could be labeled a terrorist threat if you're found to be engaging in speech that undermines a government institution that could lead to any of these acts. So if they think your words might lead to a protest against the government, and that protest might then lead to a violent breakout, which could happen at any protest, you could be labeled domestic terrorist simply for dissenting. By issuing this bulletin, they've effectively given themselves the freedom to halt any dissent they don't like under the guise of it could lead to violence. They're saying it's a domestic terrorist threat and we can't have that. And I think many of us warned this was on the horizon when politicians and others in the media were calling for more to be done against misinformation. I think some of us were mocked for saying the definition of terrorism is changing and the end result will be our own government going after anyone and everyone they deem to be morally inferior. Yet here we are. The bulletin goes on to say, the convergence of the following factors has increased the volatility, unpredictability, and complexity of the threat environment. The proliferation of false or misleading narratives, which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Again, you're putting yourself in the crosshairs if you sow discord or undermine public trust in government institutions. Don't talk bad about the government. It goes on to say, the primary terrorism-related threat to the United States continues to stem from lone offenders or small cells of individuals who are motivated by a range of foreign and or domestic grievances, often cultivated through the consumption of certain online content. So they're saying it could just be you. You don't need to be affiliated with a known neo-Nazi group or some other flagged organization. If you, acting alone, air grievances against the government that they deem to be potentially threatening, you could be flagged as a domestic terrorist. The bulletin continues, for example, there is widespread online proliferation of false or misleading narratives regarding unsubstantiated widespread election fraud and COVID-19 grievances associated with these themes, inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021. COVID-19 mitigation measures, particularly COVID-19 vaccine and mask mandates, have been used by domestic violent extremists to justify violence since 2020 and could continue to inspire these extremists to target government healthcare and academic institutions that they associate with those measures. Now, I understand that they're talking probably about January 6th, but besides angry parents at school board meetings and angry airline passengers, I don't remember there being any violent extremist attacks due to COVID. Unless they're talking about the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, which has been exposed to be mostly planned by the FBI. Of course, it goes on to say, malign foreign powers have and continue to amplify these false or misleading narratives in efforts to damage the United States. So you see, all of this dis, and malinformation is really being supported and spread by probably Russia. So if you're an angry American spreading COVID disinformation online, you're most likely a Russian asset. And that makes you dangerous to our national security. Lastly, and what needs to be pointed out, is it goes on to say DHS is working with public and private sector partners, as well as foreign counterparts, to identify and evaluate MDM, including false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories spread on social media and other online platforms that endorse or could inspire violence. Now, what gets me here is the Department of Homeland Security is saying they are working with not only the public sector, but the private sector as well. So that leads me to believe that they're working with big tech companies to censor whatever information they determine to be.
This is 1984 on steroids. Bolshevik takedown of Americans. Never thought I'd see this happen here in the United States. I put the blood of Jesus on our wicked government going against our ability to actually speak. It's evil. It's evil, my friends. So Scott with sjwellfire.com. Thank you for your support. Have a blessed day.